Without a doubt, the forehand loop is the most dominant shot in the sport of table tennis, and that is because it can be used in every possible way. You can loop a block, a push, a serve, a chop, a high ball, as well as looping another loop. This makes the forehand loop a trump card because it can come over the top of any other shot played. Creating a perfect forehand loop is really about stroke mechanics. The mechanics of any stroke pretty much fit into a box with regards to how they need to be executed, and the better the mechanics, the better potential the forehand loop can reach. Having perfect forehand loop mechanics has been something that was important to me since I was in my youth. I had perfect mechanics when I was 17 years old in junior play, at 20 years old in collegiate play, at 25 years old in international competition, and at 40 years old as a semi-retired player coach. If you can build up your stroke mechanics, then it can pay you back tenfold later on when you are focusing on maximizing the ways you can use your forehand loop in tournament play. Creating a perfect forehand loop has 6 main categories, and each category has principles that must transform into technical law if you want to have a forehand loop that can make a difference in competition that will continue to perform better at each level. Stroke production. The stroke production is the first analytic that you must perfect because it sets the tone with regards to mechanics. When the ball lands on the table, the arm needs to be as close to 90 degrees as possible. This will create the necessary snap that is required to create the spin needed. Now that you have the snap taken care of, you want to focus on the type of contact, which should be friction over force. The ball needs to create an arc, and the ratio should be at least 75% friction and 25% force. This will create the arc and the ball travel needed to clear the net. The next aspect of the loop that impacts how well it can be played is the trajectory of your snap. The trajectory of your arm should be directed in a 45-degree angle. This will give the ball the most height as well as the most depth on the table. This is what is needed to secure a safe landing, aggressive loop with a high amount of spin. This is how it's possible to loop a very heavy underspin ball against a chopper, it's also how you can loop a serve that is over the table. It is also how you can execute a forehand counter loop. Body position. The body position of your forehand loop is important because it can drastically impact how well the shot is played. The body position should be at 45 degrees because the body angle creates the ideal amount of momentum from the torso being bent over, going back to neutral position. Having the body position at 45 degrees approaching the loop also ensures that the arm is positioned below the ball, which allows the ball to be contacted at the correct position on the ball. It doesn't matter what position you are going to or coming from, but you need the correct body position to unload the forehand loop. body movement. The body movement pertains to what you need to do with your lower body to ensure a quality forehand loop. The legs should be as close to 90 degrees as possible to confirm that there's always a height surplus. A height surplus is created when the legs are bent enough there's a positive amount of space between the racket position and the table position before contacting the ball. This is how the body movement plays a role in each forehand loop that you attempt. It is important to avoid creating a height deficit because that is how the other components of the forehand loop will fall apart. Footwork. To create the perfect forehand loop, it is important to implement two types of footwork, and that is foot placement and foot speed. The anchor for the forehand loop is footwork, and foot placement is important because the stroke production, body position, body movement can't function properly without the feet being lined up to the ball. There's a constantly reshuffling of these stroke analytics, and it's grounded by footwork. If you have to attempt several forehand loops, it is important to prioritize foot speed as a component that will put the forehand loop in the optimal position. Stroke timing. The stroke timing of the forehand loop is imperative because it is the true unique identifier as to if your forehand will be played properly. The timing of the ball is the only aspect that you can't control, and the ideal position to make contact is at the top of the bounce. These four-stroke analytics depend on the timing of every single rally that is played. The closer you are to the top of the bounce, the more leverage the forehand loop has over the net, making it much easier to land. If the ball descends to the table height or lower, the only other option is to modify your forehand loop shot selection for setting up the sequence of play instead of trying to win the point outright. Total table awareness. If you are at all interested in creating the perfect forehand loop, then it would be for this moment alone. That moment is creating the perfect placement of your forehand loop to win in tournament play. The benefit of having a technically sound forehand loop is that you can create a tactically sound approach to executing it for victory. The goal is to compound your forehand loop to the point that you can finish the final forehand loop without your opponent touching the ball. Using total table awareness, there's always a position that is open that you can take advantage of. This is the pinnacle of what having the perfect forehand loop is all about. Watching your opponent's racket is a perfect way to articulate what placement on the table can win the point outright. All these stroke analytics have been put in place for you to execute your forehand loop and win. These stroke mechanics allow you to hardwire your forehand loop for making an impact in tournament play. Hardwire your game for victory with tournament table tennis.